Somebody has died again. Uzi is once again the target as Cap using the ultimate to escape. A flash ball from Uzi. He gets one. Rocks his poison. That's a double. Pay attention. Cap will be next. It's a double kill for Uzi. Cap will be run down, shot down, and killed. RNG by 4. Guanzo is on their feet. Legends never die. When Guanzo's calling out your name, RNG advance to the semifinals.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Worlds Tonight, where we break down everything that happened after day 3 of the quarterfinals here at Worlds 2017. I'm David Phreak, Turley, joined here outside looking in at Martin Deficio Lunga and Indiana Froskurinn and Black. How are you doing today?
I mean, I'm doing pretty well. I feel like even though Fnatic ended up losing, it's been some very fun quarterfinals so far, and I'm actually pretty proud of Europe.
Yeah, I can echo that sentiment. I'm also very proud of Europe. Ultimately, though, it was RNG that went through, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, so let's actually recap this quarterfinal series. Of course, a best of 5, as they all are. Game 1, pretty interesting. It was close for a little while. Of course, we're looking at the bracket real quick, of course. Yes, Royal Never Give Up did win 3-1. We know they'll be facing off SKT in a week. We'll talk about that later on. Let's talk about the series that did happen here. Again, in Game 1, and honestly, all these games were pretty close. It was a competitive series. I know some of the analysts predicted even a 3-2 series in this one. We're looking at Game 1 first off.
Yeah, the big thing for me is, and I was the person who predicted the 3-2. Unfortunately, we didn't get there. So close. Was just that stylistically, I feel that Fnatic and RNG like to win games through the same means, which is a lot through their team fighting. They're also able to play the 1-3-1. RNG also love to play out into the side lane, so I thought that they were going to be very similar and evenly matched.
I came into this game, though, with slightly different opinions on the two teams. I felt like if it went to late game team fights, RNG would win almost every game. I think they just have much better synergy right there, and I think their carries in team fights in Xiaohu and Uzi will be a step above what Fnatic is bringing to the table. So I was kind of like looking at Fnatic being like, okay, it's all about Reckless needs to get ahead in the early game so he can be in the side lane, and then Source needs to do well on the other side of the map, and Caps, his only job is push lane and be ready to go to either side lanes wherever Fnatic are trying to actually snowball the game. And they did succeed with that in some of the games, but then they also had these really late games where we got to the team fights.
See, for me, it was more so the execution on like the actual compositions that they were putting together. I agree with you that I think that I would always back Xiaohu and Uzi over Reckless and Caps. Caps, unfortunately, you know, unexperienced on the world stage, and Uzi just has that incredible reputation about him, even when he's looking across at someone like Reckless. But I just figured that RNG were going to fumble a draft at one point, or it was just going to be, you know, a random pick into these big 5v5 comps.
And that's what I really like about RNG now, is I think they've gotten a lot smarter in the way they're playing. It's not perfect by any means, but it's no longer the same all-in aggression in the early game from MLXG, except for the 4th game, where he went a little bit too ham.
Fair.
And also, it's a lot more about stall through push mid into defensive vision and not blind engages. And it's actually something Fnatic struggle against, especially in the 4th game, which is where we saw this, you know, late game Corki and Twitch just take over.
Yeah, sure. Of course, we'll get through the rest of the games in the series. Late game team fighting tended to be a very big strength. Game 2, of course, we have footage of that one as well. You mentioned Soaz doing well on the side lane. He was really big, I thought, throughout this series. In this game, I mean, it was back and forth and back and forth. RNG, of course, yes, did end up winning this one despite all the early ganks. You're seeing some 6 Baron steals.
No, just deny the entrance to the Baron pit. They had a ward on him. They had like 5 knockbacks, and they allowed him in the pit.
Yeah, no one was ever playing the back of the Baron pits. I find it very strange, but speaking to Soaz, I mean, frankly, we have to pick a player of the series, and you have to pick it from the winning team, but I think every single person on the desk was like, Soaz. Even though Fnatic lost, we all wanted Soaz to be the player of the series.
Sure. He was absolutely amazing, and even in Game 3, it was even more impressive. You're going to see the gold difference in this game here in the second one. I mean, it was up and down and up and down. RNG eventually came out ahead, but Fnatic were up so much, and you heard Soaz talk about it in the post-game interview with Shox. He's like, we didn't feel like our comp could siege, so they had to keep doing Baron baits, but they were up like 10,000 or so gold at a certain point. Like, Vayne or not, you just kill a turret and threaten the dive.
There was a bot lane tower in front of the inhib. They were sitting on like 20% HP for over 10 minutes in that game. I don't care what kind of comp you have. You can kill that tower if you're 10k gold ahead. They had Elder Drake as well, and they couldn't kill it. They missed time at Talia wall, they back away from it, and when you hesitate so much, you keep giving chances to the other team when it comes to the comebacks.
And it's interesting watching Worlds develop so far. We've had a lot of these like 10,000 gold comebacks, like 3 or 4 spring to memory in the few games we've had so far at Worlds. There have been, of course, stomps as well where it snowballs from the beginning. You know, some teams have been able to close out games. Some teams have failed miserably and given the entire game right back. And that's been, of course, heartbreaking to watch because those games could have been won. I think back to Misfits Game 4 against SKT, this Game 2 right here. Like, this very this almost could have been a European team in the final with the Fnatic Misfits semi. I want to move for the rest of the series real quick, though. Game 3, I believe we haven't covered just yet. This was the one win we actually got from Fnatic here. This one threat team out of Royal Never Give Up. Eventually, they ran out of damage.
Yeah, the fact that Uzi is sitting so high and mighty on this Kog'Maw as well. He has a ridiculous KDA line right now, but just the classic Uzi. Like I was saying on the desk, I've watched over 500 games of this guy, and yes, you will get these amazing godlike performances from him, but he also does plenty of that, and it really costs him the 3-0 here.
And I really think also the big turning point for Fnatic that actually allowed them to get back was Uzi going Randuin's Omen instead of Frozen Mallet.
Yeah.
Or even Essence Reaver. Like, his entire job was basically just to get a Black Shield on you, step forward, and just start shooting at whatever is in front of you. And Fnatic kept kiting away from it. They never even hit him. Randuin's Omen was useless for him. If he had Frozen Mallet in some of the later fights, he actually gets 1 to 2 more kills. And Fnatic probably never wins the game.
Which is why I love the pivot and the adaptation of then giving responsibility to Xiaohu the very next game. They still kept Uzi on kind of that late game hyperscale like the Twitch, but they're like, okay, the Galio didn't work out for us. You're taking Corki now.
And Game 4 is interesting because it went back the other way where it's now RNG on a 2-threat team. The Corki from Xiaohu, obviously very, very good. You mentioned the Twitch, but it's a Varus who's not even like the sickest carry in the first place.
Yeah.
And then he rushed Guardian Angel 3rd item as the only threat on the team, Reckless, the Varus I'm speaking about right here on Fnatic, and it's like, no wonder in any 5-on-5, you actually heard Xiaohu in this post-game interview said, we knew we outskilled them late game, we just had to not feed for 20 minutes, and it was a formality to win that game in the series.
And if you want to draft a comp like the one from Fnatic, man, you gotta be so much more aggressive in the way you're playing. You can't spend 20 minutes around the Baron, not even actually threaten to kill it. They started a few times, backed away instantly, as soon as the enemy team showed up, and we kept talking about on the cast, like, at some point, you got to go for 50-50 Baron, or you got to go to another lane and say go bot lane with your TPs and your AD carry and try and kill them. But I think Fnatic, the pressure got to them. Like, the GA from Reckless was completely useless as a single damage threat right
Ninja
there.
Tabby first item as well.
Ninja Tabby first
That
item.
made sense for the composition, though. They were against 5 physical damage dealers. All of them.
Well, Corki is high magic.
Well, yes, eventually.
But, I mean, okay.
I think also just another small thing there is, in the draft phase, Fnatic do not play Galio mid. They played it once all year long in the mid lane. They felt forced to first pick it instead of just using a ban on it.
Yep.
I think that decision to be like, we can't let Caitlyn go through, we're so afraid of it. I think it was Caitlyn also in the 4th game.
Yeah, I believe so.
Away. I think at this point, you have to take that gamble.
Unless you hope that, Caps had practiced it in solo queue or in scrims enough. He says, I got 6 games on it. I feel comfortable on the champion. That can sometimes be the case. We've seen players bring out things they haven't played in 6 months, and it's really good. Sometimes it came through. We saw it in a couple of our other series here as well. I mean, Leona out of nowhere with Fervor, where, Ignar's coach is like, oh yeah, it's Fervor's good. And he's like, all right, sure. And it works, right? So sometimes this does work. I don't ever want to malign a player for bringing out something new, and I'll give them benefit of the doubt. They practiced it. Of course, yes, it did not work here. They didn't finish the comp in time. Heartbreak for Fnatic. But as you mentioned earlier on in this segment, Europe can feel pretty good about this. 2 teams in the top 8. G2 got the finals of MSI earlier this year. Considering that Korea beats everyone almost all the time, this is a pretty solid year for the European LCS.
Not just solid, I think it was a pretty incredible year for the European LCS. I mean, we almost made history, or got to witness history yesterday, when Misfits took SKT to Game 5. And that was a single team fight away from eliminating the champions from the tournament.
And also, just if you consider their kind of idea around Europe going into Worlds, a lot of people are saying this region is so weak. Like,
yeah.
Rift Rivals happened. Everyone based it on one tournament.
EU boom.
Right there. EU is boom. I've heard that one so many times and read so many times that EU is just completely done. We have so much talent in Europe that we keep having these new lineups where players like Caps, who came in this year for Fnatic, Misfits. Maxlore, especially, he's been around now for at least a few splits, but he's still a fairly new player. Then you have Alfari, Hansama, coming in this year as rookies, and we keep finding new players and new talent. So it's amazing to watch these teams work hard the entire year and then actually go to Worlds and look very competitive in these quarterfinals.
It's actually quite interesting that Korea is always attributed to that, that ability to grind up and develop so much new talent. It's fine, all of the Korean superstars can leave because they'll just make new superstars, but that never seems to come up in conversation when talking about Europe, and it is frankly very true. I mean, you know very well how...
lots of really good European players play in my home league. They're great. We love
and
them
yet
all.
we keep, Europe keeps building up new ones.
Yeah, and we're going to keep taking them, and eventually they'll all become immigrants, and we'll have 2 European leagues. It'll be wonderful.
Yeah, I think the talent pool in Korea is still a little bit deeper.
Sure, of
So
course.
please
There's a
don't take
reason
all
Korea
of
wins
them.
everything. Well, speaking of Korea, of course, I want to shed our light towards the semifinal matchup we now know is going to be happening. First up, Xiao, who actually shared his thoughts on what it means for RNG to go up against SKT on Saturday.
我觉得进入8强，是我们就从我个人而言，我觉得这就是必须的事情。如果没有进的话，反而会可能会显得很失败吧。然后的话，现在的话已经进入了8强，然后如果我们能成功晋级的话，4强也会碰到 SKT。我觉得跟 SKT 的就是一次碰面会意义比较深刻吧，因为我们去年已经连续输给他们2次了，所以今年很想赢下他们。
And it definitely could be a possibility. I know one of the storylines we saw coming into the quarterfinals is that a lot of these teams look wounded. None of the regional champions are actually in the tournament anymore, right? TSM, G2, all the play-in teams, Longzhu out as well, EDG gone, Flash Wolves, all these teams have already died. So all the regional winners are gone, and it's now who's playing better at Worlds, and SKT, of course, narrowly winning their best of 5, Royal on similar margins, honestly, winning theirs, and now it's a battle of mortals who's going to take it through.
But that's the context for the audience that just tuned in to Worlds. RNG don't care if SKT are wounded. They would actually prefer that SKT were playing at their best ability. At Rift Rivals, Xiao Hu actually went out into the parking lot and he cried because RNG weren't picked as the team to take on SKT. Instead, the LPL democratically voted for it to be Team WE. Xiao Hu in that moment promised 2 things. He said, as soon as Uzi returns, we're going to kick WE's ass, and then we're going to win the championship. Now, unfortunately, he didn't win that championship, but he can win this one. And it's so important that people understand that the LPL is not afraid of the LCK, and they are certainly not afraid of SKT.
No, exactly. They shouldn't be afraid of SKT right now. They do have a lot of issues. Now, obviously, there is a full week of practice once again for these teams, and it's always hard to kind of predict if a team like SKT is going to identify a lot of their problems and actually work on them, fix them coming into the next week, because they didn't really do it going from groups into quarters. And that does, again, leave a lot of question marks because the current roster, we have to look at the bottom lane. Bang and Wolf are not playing very well, especially not in the early game, and that is a way in for teams.
The question I have actually is your opinion that like every pro in the world has gotten worse at League of Legends, or has, to use the meme, the gap closed and so many more teams have the ability to fight these players? Like, you know, Bang as a player, obviously still an incredible talent, a great League of Legends player. Uzi's, of course, incredible as well, and he's almost always been one of the laning gods. Like, almost no one stands up to Uzi in the 2-on-2 in the first place. And so how much this is Bang actually slumping, or, you know, are Prey and Gorilla getting better so he looks less good, you know, internationally? You know, Sven and Mythy and all these other duo lanes stepping up and looking better and better over time.
I think the problem starts with kind of the word choice. If you say that someone is, you know, the best in the world at something, suddenly people then like, well, what about that second place guy? Does that guy suddenly suck? And it's like, no, that guy is still very good. And so it's about understanding what that gap is between the best in the world and the guy who comes in second. Like, do you realize how good you have to be just to suck at Worlds? Like,
yeah.
that is astronomically high.
So good at League of Legends.
Exactly. So it's then understanding that. But, you know, the Korean players not playing with like 6 fingers here. What's always made the Korean players, at least in my opinion, the cut above is their team play. And right now, frankly, I just think that the meta, or at least the way that a lot of teams are kind of hacking into the meta, is kind of band-aid or shoring up a lot of those, you know, more intensive decision-making moments that the Korean teams just had on lockdown, because they seem to read into every single portion of the game. Now it's like, I can just, you know, strap a Maokai on, I can strap a Galio on, I can just run straight into you.
Yeah, I mean, 100% agree that team play is always the #1 thing, but I think with the best Korean players, when they're in their prime, you know, they are a step above mechanically as well against most of the players, even at Worlds. Like, you start seeing just slightly more knowledge about the matchup you're playing, or exactly when you can go for the all-in, when you can't, how to win the 2v2 skirmish. I often see there a step above from the best Korean players. But the thing about SKT at the moment is you look at this lineup against Misfits, and you don't think to yourself, Bang, way better than Hansama. Oh, okay, Blank in the jungle, way better than Maxwell. No, you're actually like, all these are fairly even, and some of them even went in favor of Misfits during the series. Like, Ignor's performance was amazing, and it was on Faker to be like, I am not losing this. I am not losing this quarterfinal, and he just literally put the team on his back.
So let's put you to this matchup then. In 7 days, SKT versus Royal Negro up. Who wins it?
Who's gonna go first? I'm gonna say SKT will win.
Okay.
Oh.
So I have to give, now do
Game
I
score?
show my work?
3-2, 3-1, 3-0.
I think it'll be 3-1. And the thing
3-1.
is, you know, I want to believe, I want to get behind RNG,
Okay.
but I see massive problems in their decision making and how they actually execute on leads, and I think that SKT will not fall into the same mistakes.
I'm going RNG.
Me too.
I think SKT have struggled so
Oh, you
much
guys
with
would
the
go with
early
that.
game. He struggled so much in the early. SKT have struggled so much in the early game that most of these games might come down to big late game team fights, and I definitely think RNG can win then against SKT.
I agree. That's my analysis somewhat as well. I definitely think we're going to see really fun things out of Uzi, especially in the bot lane. I have huge respect for him. He shows up almost always at Worlds, gets his next attempt at making it to his third World Final. If he can win this one, maybe this time he'll actually win. Who even knows? So final topic then. Tomorrow's matchup, the final quarterfinal, Cloud9 versus Team WE. Team WE, of course, the #1 seed coming out of the group. They were power ranked by many as the best Chinese team, even though they had to come through as...
Many.
Well, but I feel like a lot of other people shared that opinion with your strong will. But they came through the regional qualifier, came through the play, and WE looked better every single week. They got progressively stronger. 5-1 record out of the group, I do believe, and now they're up against Cloud9 from North America.
I mean, it's hard to read Team WE's style and recognize how good they are. They are a very crisp, clean, and very decisive macro-oriented team, and you almost never see that out of an LPL team. They will play the same way whether you're Lion Gaming or whether you're SKT, and it's just clean, calm, and methodical.
They live and die by Mystic in the bot lane. And funny enough, C9 will look to snowball mid. So we have two different lanes right here being focused.
Yep.
And I think the team who can actually do that the best might take the entire series. I think WE will be favorites, but I'm not looking at this one as a clear 3-0 by any means.
If any of the matchups have shown us anything, the upsets are very clearly likely. Samsung Galaxy 3-0 over Longzhu, which was a huge upset, and the rest of the matches, of course, very close as well. So it's going to be a fun one no matter what. Stay tuned for that one. It's going to be coming up on that Sunday matchup, same normal time and place. And, of course, next week, our semifinals. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you for more League of Legends action very shortly. Goodbye.
RNG will find out if they can make their run, if they can set up that rematch with SKT in the semi-finals.
Cost them right there with the summer spells, and now they're going for Uzi.
All right, there's a flash and a rocket jump available. Uzi's not going to be able to do a thing. Uzi's going low. The barrel's here. He gets one. Manages to rocket jump away. MLXG's trying to channel. Flash forward from Roxa. Gets the barrel. Oh, she's knocked down. And Royal never give up. Win game one. Ming survives just a few seconds longer. He's escaped. MLXG now. Look at him. Down. Caps in a 1v3. 5 members of RNG in the pit. MLXG takes it down. Uzi, Free, RNG. They have another game. And Fnatic are down 0-2. We have a replay ready for you guys that I would like to ask Jat and Deficio's ability to analyze.
The lid wasn't on. That was the big mistake.
But he's got a Guardian Angel to bring it down. Uzi is free hitting everybody on Fnatic.
Get him, please.
No flash, no flash.
No! Knock him away, and Caps is not here. He's running away.
Do it again. Get in there. The next time is not in yet. And Fnatic do it. Are you not entertained? RNG get their first kills of the fight, and it's a double. They turn the next ones around. That's another for Uzi. Next one. Roxas poison. That's a double. Pay attention. Caps will be next. It's a double kill for Uzi.
Okay, boy, that's